The story you're about to hear is not just disturbing, it's real. In a quiet town in Germany, a young woman's life spiraled into something so dark, so unexplainable, that it still divides believers and skeptics decades later. Her name was Anneliese Michel. And what happened to her became one of the most controversial exorcism cases in modern history. But this isn't just a story about religion or possession. It's about suffering, belief, and a line between mental illness and the supernatural that may be thinner than we want to admit. Because by the end of this case, a young woman would be dead, and the question would remain: was she failed by science, or by faith? Anneliese Michel was born in 1952 in Bavaria, West Germany, into a deeply religious Catholic family. From an early age, she was described as kind, intelligent, and devout. Her upbringing was strict, shaped by guilt and faith, especially influenced by her mother, who carried her own past burdens. Religion wasn't just part of Anneliese's life. It was everything. At the age of 16, everything began to change. In 1968, Anneliese experienced her first seizure. She was diagnosed with temporal lobe epilepsy, a neurological condition known to cause seizures and altered states of consciousness. Doctors prescribed medication, and for a while, things seemed manageable. But then, the symptoms grew stranger. She began hearing voices. Not just whispers, but voices she claimed were demonic. She described seeing faces, terrifying, distorted figures. Her behavior shifted. She became withdrawn, depressed, and deeply distressed. Doctors adjusted her medications, including antipsychotic drugs, but nothing seemed to help. Then came the turning point. Anneliese became convinced that she was possessed. She claimed the voices told her she was damned, that she would burn in hell forever. She said she could no longer pray, that sacred objects caused her intense discomfort. According to those close to her, she began to avoid religious symbols, eventually refusing to enter churches at all. But her family saw this differently. To them, this wasn't just illness. This was spiritual warfare. By the early 1970s, after years of failed medical treatments, Anneliese's parents turned to the church. They believed their daughter was under demonic influence. Several priests initially refused their request for an exorcism, insisting her condition was psychiatric. But eventually, in 1975, one priest agreed. Father Arnold Renz joined Father Ernst Alt in performing the exorcisms. Official permission was granted by the bishop. What followed would last nearly a year. Between 1975 and 1976, Anneliese underwent 67 exorcism sessions. These rituals were intense, repetitive, and physically exhausting. Recordings from the sessions still exist, capturing her voice as she growled, screamed, and spoke in tones that many described as inhuman. She claimed to be possessed not by one, but multiple demons, including Lucifer, Judas, and even figures like Nero. Her behavior became increasingly extreme. She would kneel for hours, performing what became known as penitential exercises, sometimes doing up to 600 squats in a single session. She refused to eat, saying the demons wouldn't allow it. Her body weakened. Her health declined rapidly. At one point, she reportedly attempted to eat spiders and coal. She tore her clothes, injured herself, and even drank her own urine. Despite all this, the exorcisms continued. And here's where the story takes a chilling turn. As her condition worsened, medical intervention stopped entirely. Her parents and the priests believed that continuing treatment would interfere with the exorcism process. They were convinced that what they were witnessing was not illness, but possession. By mid-1976, Anneliese was severely malnourished. She weighed just 68 pounds. On July 1, 1976, she died in her home. The official cause of death was starvation and dehydration. She was 23 years old. Now pause for a moment. Because this is where the story shifts from tragedy to something even more unsettling. If you're finding this case as disturbing as it sounds, make sure to subscribe to Shadow Files and drop a like. It helps bring more real stories like this to light, and trust me, this one is far from over. After her death, the case exploded across Germany. Authorities launched an investigation, not into the supernatural, but into the people responsible. Anneliese's parents and the two priests were charged with negligent homicide. The prosecution argued that she died because she was denied proper medical care. That her death was preventable. That belief had overridden reason. The defense told a different story. They claimed Anneliese had chosen this path. That she believed her suffering was a form of atonement, a sacrifice to save others from damnation. They argued that she had been beyond medical help, and that the exorcisms were her only hope. The trial in 1978 became a media sensation. Audio recordings from the exorcisms were played in court. The public heard her voice, distorted, anguished, terrifying. Some people were convinced they were listening to something truly supernatural. Others believed it was a clear sign of severe mental illness. In the end, the court reached a verdict. All four were found guilty of negligent homicide. But the punishment was relatively light. They received suspended sentences and were allowed to walk free. The court acknowledged that they genuinely believed they were helping her. And that's what makes this case so deeply unsettling. Because it forces a question that doesn't have an easy answer. Where do we draw the line between belief and responsibility? Now let's look at the clues left behind. The evidence that continues to fuel debate even today. First, the medical perspective. Experts point to her epilepsy and possible psychosis as the root cause of her experiences. Temporal lobe epilepsy can produce intense hallucinations, religious delusions, and altered perceptions of reality. Combined with severe depression, it creates a condition where someone might genuinely believe they're possessed. Second, the environment. Anneliese grew up in a household where religious guilt was heavily emphasized. Her mother reportedly believed suffering was a path to redemption. This kind of upbringing can shape how someone interprets psychological distress. Then there are the recordings. Some people who listen to them claim her voice changes unnaturally. That it sounds like multiple entities speaking through her. But others argue that vocal distortion, combined with stress and psychological breakdown, can produce similar effects. And finally, the physical decline. Her refusal to eat, her extreme behaviors, all align with severe mental illness. But to those who believe in possession, it's seen as proof of demonic control. So what really happened to Anneliese Michel? There are two dominant theories. The first is grounded in science. Anneliese was suffering from a combination of neurological and psychiatric conditions. Her symptoms were misinterpreted through a religious lens, leading to a tragic outcome. The exorcisms, rather than helping her, accelerated her decline by preventing proper treatment. This explanation is supported by most medical professionals. But then there's the second theory. That Anneliese was truly possessed. That what she experienced couldn't be explained by science alone. That the voices, the behavior, the recordings, were evidence of something beyond our understanding. Some even believe she willingly accepted her fate, seeing herself as a martyr in a spiritual battle. It sounds unbelievable. But for many, it's just as convincing as the medical explanation. And that's what makes this case so powerful. Because no matter which side you fall on, one fact remains. A young woman suffered and died. Not because no one cared, but because everyone believed they were doing the right thing. And maybe that's the most terrifying part of all. that sometimes the greatest danger isn't evil itself, but the certainty that we understand it. So what do you think? Was Anneliese Michel a victim of untreated mental illness, or something far darker? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more cases that blur the line between reality and the unknown, subscribe to Shadow Files. Because some stories aren't just meant to be told, they're meant to haunt you. Now here's something to leave you with. In the years after her death, her grave became a place of pilgrimage. People still visit, still leave candles, still pray. Not for her soul, but for answers. And maybe that's something we're still searching for. Because the truth behind what happened to Anneliese Michel may never be fully understood. And that's what makes it so dangerous. And so unforgettable.